So I'm going to bang some fret slots into the ebony fretboard. I was hoping to use stainless steel on both of them, but it turns out I had a lot less wire than I thought I did. So the rosewood has stainless steel and the ebony is going to have nickel silver. Now the nickel silver wire I've got is slightly larger than the stainless, so I just had to come back and make these fret slots ever so slightly deeper to make sure that these go in. And this stuff comes in 1 meter lengths of pre-coiled wire, but it isn't quite coiled enough, so I'm just gonna bend it a little bit more. That's my Allen key. There we go. So it's just slightly over radiused. So if I've got a 12-inch radius fretboard, I want like, I don't know, 10, something like that. Not scientific. And hopefully I've got enough fret wire, or we're in trouble. Do away with that. So I've got my crude fret block. I'm just going to cut them to length and then stick them in. Now I'm starting at this end because I'm cutting the wire quite close to the edge of the fretboard to make sure I've got enough. So if I manage to cut one so it's just slightly too short, then I can use it for the next fret down. I use a lot less fret wire up that way. When I'm cutting this fret wire with my end cutters, I'm always cutting them across the tang as opposed to this way. If I cut them this way, I'm more likely to crush the tang, which may well mean that I ruin the edge and the fret might not go in very well. God, I hope I got enough. It's going to be close, I think. It's the annoying thing about coiled wire, it gets in the way of the workbench. I think I may very well run out of fret wire. Oh, look at that, wire to spare. Now, I've probably got enough for one cock up, so I shall have to be very careful. 2, 1, sweet. Just using the offcut here, that gives me a good bit of stability underneath the neck. Now, there's not really an awful lot to this, it's just really a case of bang them in. Got to be careful about how I position them because they're barely oversized. And I'm starting at the ends. Getting the ends down and then working my way in. I just got ever such a slight splitting in the top on the very end as this was going in, because it didn't want to go in. It went, I mean the split's disappeared, it's all compressed now that the fret's in properly. So, I'm going to do what I forgot to do, which is just round off the very top of the fret to help them go in. Which is a bit silly really. I'm just using my little cheapy jeweler's file, the triangular one for this, which is the exact same one I used to do the little Cupid's bow bit of the headstock. So there you go, I use it for all sorts. That's better. Hopefully that'll make the rest of them go in a bit easier. Now I mentioned hammering in from the edges first, and what that does effectively is gets the edges, they're at their radius, it gets those seated first, and then as you work your way down into the middle, then what that does is flattens the fret out to match the radius of the fretboard, but because these edges are already seated it just kind of pushes them along. Whereas if you start by banging into the middle, what it's going to do is flatten the fret to begin with. So you're going to end up with a flat fret with no radius in it, and then an awful lot more work to try and bang the fret in at the edges. So they go in a lot easier if you start at the edges, I find. Cool. Now all the frets are in, my ears are ringing, so I'm just using a fine feeler gauge, and I'm just going to use that to see if any of the slots, if I can start this end, if it goes under the fret crown, then like there for example, then I know that the fret is not down fully. You know, this is a bit oily, let's give it a clean. I really want that going all over my fretboard, if I can help it. Has that gone under? I think it has gone under. And of course you can do this by eye, but I find with a feeler gauge it's just a bit more precise. And it probably doesn't matter too much if the fret is a tiny bit proud in the middle, but it means there'll be more work to do on levelling the frets. Because a fret that's not in properly will be high from the off. Cool, frets are in. This is low viscosity super glue. I'm just going to drip a drop into the end just under the tang. And the idea is that that just fills any gaps under the fret, on the fret in the slot. However, if a fret decides not to stay down, there's absolutely no reason not to wick in a bit of super glue and just clamp the fret down until it stays down. I did have to do that a couple of times on the stainless steel wire, because it did fight me a bit. Whereas this stuff is a doddle in comparison. Managed not to get any on the fretboard there as well. It's a good start. Right, I'll leave those two set up for a minute, and then I shall file the edges of the frets. Right, I'm just going to use a file, and I'm going to knock the worst of the fret edges over, because the sharp edges where I cut with the end cutters, they tend to snag on the fretboard leveling file. So if I just knock those down a bit, the rest of the process is a bit easier. Now I'm filing down the fretboard, not up, because I don't want to be filing this way, because there's a chance that I might end up pulling the fret out of the fretboard. So I'm filing down towards the tang, not towards the crown. Other side. Right, fret leveling file, I'm just going to go up this way, get them nice and flush with the wood. Being careful of the headstock. Right, what's this? 150. Once I've filed, I like to just use a block. Then it wants to be so that I can't feel the fret along the end at all. Perfect, I think. Cool. So that's my frets in, glued. Now I just need to put in the bevel. Same file, I just use this. I mean, there is a, let me find it. This thing here from G&W, which is a way to do it, I suppose. I don't really like this for a couple of reasons. I don't really like the angle. I think the angle is a little bit too steep for my liking. I prefer to have a slightly steeper angle on the ends of my frets and a slightly wider neck to compensate. I just find it's more comfortable. And also with this thing, I find that if you're not really careful, it can slip over the fretboard quite easily when you're using this bevel edge, and then that creates an awful lot more work with leveling. So I prefer to just stick with the good old crimson file and do it by eye. Bit more, just want to try and just round the very edge of the fretboard. Cool. Just gonna give them a bit of a sand, the edges there. Literally just wrapping a piece of 150 around my finger, and then I'm just gonna gently sand the edges, and that's just gonna knock the very edges off of the tangs. And just roll over the edge of the fretboard as well. So this method doesn't work as well for stainless steel frets, because the frets are so much harder. You tend to end up rolling over the fretboard and not really doing anything to the frets, which just kind of makes the ends of the frets do this. Sorry, the ends in between the frets do this. So it's not so good for that. Fresh bit of sandpaper. Same again. Now, I'm not doing a full-on fret job now. That's just so that they're tidy, they're not sharp anymore. I'm not going to catch myself on them. And that's it. One fret job finished. Oh, that's a lie. 2 fret jobs finished. So these ones are stainless steel, slightly smaller than these. These ones were a pain in the arse to get in fact, I got super glue all over the fretboard and I had to scrape a load of it off. I managed to dent the fretboard there where I twatted it with a hammer, so I'm going to use a soldering iron and a little bit of water and a bit of steam should decompress that so it's back to looking perfect. And then, I don't know, what should we do next? Probably think about either carving these necks or start work on the bodies. We shall see.